First question, how do I help my wife deal with the death of her beloved grandmother? She's feeling deeply about it and asking, how long will I be sad? She wants to shut herself in a room, but she's not. So how do I love her through this? Well, you've answered your question. Love her through this. Grieving is about loss, period. That's what it's about. So don't play into the loss. We're around people who are grieving loss, and we act like we've lost everything too. We act like they've lost everything. Grieving is a kind of victimhood. A certain amount of it's healthy, but the longer we act like victims, the longer the grieving gets. Don't play into the loss. It's not total or permanent. So talk about her grandmother. People are afraid to talk to people who are dying. They're afraid to talk to people who've lost somebody. Afraid to talk about people who've died. We use words like passed. She has passed. Because we're so afraid of that word. Lost, dead. We figure if we use a different word, it'll be somehow different. Oh, and then in some place, even past isn't good enough. She has transitioned. She died. That doesn't imply that she's not still alive, but as far as this world's concerned, dead. If you're not sure of it, go dig up the coffin. Dead. We need to face it. Talk about her grandmother. Talk about what she enjoyed about her grandmother. Talk about what her grandmother enjoyed. Talk about what she wished were different. We pussyfoot around people who are dying or people who've had loss. So, what do you wish your grandmother done more of? Talk about everything, feelings, memories. Point out some ways how you are not like her grandmother and how you wish you could have been more like her, or some ways that you might imitate her, emulate her, bring some of her grandmother's qualities into your own character. Whatever comes to your mind, don't avoid it. Talk about it. So why do all this? We don't know what to do with loss. We need to talk about it and be loved around it. That's how we heal all wounds, isn't it? It's how we heal the wounds of shame, of pain, of everything. You talk about your anger, you talk about your shame, you feel loved while you're angry or feeling ashamed, and it goes away because the wound heals. Same here. We talk about our loss, get loved around it. Often we're grieving what we hoped could have been, what we hoped we could have had, but did not have. So her grandmother may have been perfect, probably not. She needs a chance to talk about that, about how she wished things had been different. We need reassurance that our lives are not over when we lose somebody. Sometimes we need to talk about, with some people, depending on their spiritual orientation, about what the next life will be like, about what our hopes are about meeting grandma again. Some people don't have those hopes. Some people do, and some people would at the very least like to talk about it. So notice, we're just doing a lot of talking and loving. The talking actually is just a form of loving. As opposed to, gee, don't feel bad. Oh, she's in a better place. Make it go away. We're trying to make ourselves feel better when we do that. Now, the same person who wrote this email wrote another one before we got to today. In fact, I think I got it today. So the writer said, I originally asked about helping my wife with grieving. Now I realize that it's about any pain at all. As near as I can figure, I get to be present and as loving and as kind as I can be. My wife has been injured numerous times during our relationship, not just with the loss of her grandmother. I used to blame her because it was usually her pain was a result of her stupid risk-taking. But I'm not angry anymore. I just sit with her while she's in pain and occasionally offer help that I'm willing to give. It's still hard seeing her in pain. Pain is loss. Or Grief is the pain from loss. And pain is pain. So love her. In grieving, it's always about loss of love of some kind. So perhaps it was companionship, losing a job. Even people grieve. Well, even then, what are they grieving? The loss of the actual job? Rarely, though it's possible. They grieve the loss of income, sure, but they also grieve the loss of status, role, which contributes to their feeling worthwhile, which leads to other people approving of them. Again, a form of love. Not real love, conditional love, but that's what most people grieve anyway. Loss of a dog, loss of love. Loss of money. Again, with money we purchase all the different forms of imitation love. When we grieve, when we're in pain, it's always about love. And only love can make up for a loss of love. So what's the solution in all these cases of loss? Love, duh, since that's what we're grieving. And if people don't respond initially, what do? Love them some more. And if somebody grieves a really long time, keep loving them. It's been my experience that the longer the grief, the bigger the emptiness. I've never seen somebody who feels relatively unconditionally loved grieve for a long time. Never seen it, because they have enough within them. They've received enough love that they realize that no matter what they lost or who they lost, they're still not without love. So they can't grieve completely because they didn't lose completely. And people tend to grieve most deeply when they think they've lost most deeply, when they had the least. Just something to consider as we love people. Notice I didn't say comfort. Love people who are grieving. Here's somebody who wrote about the Real Love retreat that they just left a day or 2 days ago. The experience this weekend was beyond cool. The love in the room was yummy to the point that I thought if I stuck out my tongue, I could taste it. It really does feel that good. And yet most people in the world have no idea that it even exists. There's a man from England who's going to be bringing a relative of his here in November to a retreat. And he's been teaching this man real love and showing him real love over the last couple of months. If you'd asked him prior to this, the man would have said, well, my life is fine. But as he sees this man who's been living real love for a year or so, as he sees him change and become happy, he has realized I've been settling for far less than I could have had all these years. And he is now interested in transforming his life, in not settling for eating garbage anymore. This writer continues, right now I still feel calm, I feel still, which for me is in itself a miracle. And now that I'm still, the emotions of the weekend are really hitting me. I've been crying a lot, but it feels like it's in a good way. We cry for lots of reasons. I wrote a blog about that recently. Sometimes we cry from sadness or grieving, but in this case, sometimes you cry out of a sense of relief or hope. Or sometimes you've been hiding your feelings for so long that now that you feel loved, you feel safe enough to actually cry tears of sadness or pain, which have seemed futile before. In a world that is bleak and hopeless, why would you even bother to cry tears of sadness or pain? Nobody's there to listen. Nobody's there to make the pain any better. So you just stuff it further and further, deeper and deeper. She continues, I've been told time and again that it's hard for people to see me and therefore hard for them to love me. And I know this is true since I hide even when I'm out in the open, especially in a group. I hide my pain from people and from myself so naturally that I don't even know where to begin when I share. You don't seem to have an issue getting right to it, though, to the pain. She's referring to me, probably because I just like to see people suffer. No, it's not difficult for me to see pain because I'm not in pain, because I'm not afraid. If we're afraid, we're far too consumed with our own pain to see the pain of other people or deal with the pain of other people, or frankly, even to care about it. If you're in enough pain yourself, you haven't got enough energy to care about anybody else's pain. She says, I've felt emotionally homeless my whole life. Interesting phrase that I'm not sure I've heard before. Emotionally homeless. And I had no idea just how deeply I've been wanting to feel like I belong somewhere. I belong here, she says. I belong with real love people. All this time that I've been in real love, she's been in for several years, I was only half in. I want to be all in now, and this is what I need help with. I don't even know what all in would look like for me since I'm so addicted to withdrawing from people. My brain will always find reasons to withdraw, and then they're so believable to me. You're all in right now, honey. Just keep going. You can do this. You're worth it. Just keep connecting to these people that you felt this delicious, to use, well, yummy was the word you used, love with. It's real. There's no reason for it to stop. And since it's unconditional, there's no reason for the supply to be limited either. I know a woman who has been just hurt terribly in her life, which is not a rare phenomenon, and has reacted by attacking, defending, criticizing, withdrawing. She has a horrifying variety of responses. They scare people, and they're just automatic. All you have to do is say good morning. What do you mean by that? Poof, she responds. And it has made her virtually unapproachable. She's had conflicts with everybody, her family, her friends, couldn't hold a job. It just appeared that getting through to her would be impossible. We did an intervention. We did more than one retreat. We did many, many phone calls and countless emails and texts and so on. And she wrote just a few days ago and said this: it feels pretty darn good to have somebody who loves me, finally, after all these years, who is there. She said, she capitalized this because it's a word that she has trouble with. You were right all those times that you told me how important it is to trust. It makes all the difference. The more I trust you, the more my basic, fundamental experience of being alive is transforming. That's quite a thing to say. This has changed her whole notion of being alive. In fact, she realizes now that prior to this, she's really just been among the walking dead. And I reassured her here. I've always just told her the truth. I've told her, like I said here, I tell you when you're hysterical or arguing or difficult or abrasive or prickly. And at times you really hated that. But it was all to get you to this place, to seeing the truth of the whole picture of you. I simply tell you what you need to know. And right now, you're trusting. Hallelujah. You're getting the point of being alive. You're seeing the overall picture. And that's pretty miraculous. She continues, I'm starting to feel intrinsically safe for the first time in my entire life. This is easily the most important thing you have ever said in your life. That now, safe and trusting is your baseline, what you return to. Whereas up to now, all you've done is run from pain, which has really never gotten you anywhere. You continue. It's a mysterious experience, wonderfully mysterious. And I'm actually starting to be glad and relieved to trust, as opposed to overcoming fear and resistance in order to trust. And that, my dear, is the tipping point. This is where our lives really change. If trusting is an effort, if it's a constant struggle, a constant mystery, it doesn't last. When you can see that trusting is the easier, happier way to live, finally, you win. And you're able to continue trusting. It becomes the thing that you naturally go back to. You continue. It's starting to sink in that you're not Santa Claus, you're not disappearing, you're still there. Regarding the problem of people withdrawing from me, I'm sure my defensiveness and attacking trained them not to talk to me. I'm sure they felt that there was no use even trying. You're right. You're right. That is the reason people withdrew from you. And it's not your fault. And all of you who can relate to this, listen to this. There are things we all do that cause people to be prickly toward us, withdraw from us, not want to be around us. You were taught to defend yourself and attack. You had to in order to survive. But then it became an unconscious habit. It became your automatic thing, your default. And you were doomed. But now you're overcoming it. You're learning. You're becoming truly happy. You're not giving up. Now you're just observing rather than immediately responding by attacking. More and more people will not avoid you. And you've already discovered this. You've already described people who want to be around you because they're attracted to your happiness. That's how it goes. People are attracted to that. You can trust that. Don't assume that people will treat you as they always have. Assume that you really can change stuff. Assume that if you change, your relationships will too. They pretty much have to. It's a miraculous story in this particular woman because she was on her way to dead. And it took some struggles, no kidding. It took grabbing her by the hair on occasion and jerking her out of the water when she was drowning after she jumped back in to drown several hundred times. But she's beginning to trust, like really trust. It's amazing after that. I talk regularly to a woman who has lived an entire life of misery and loneliness, pain, fear, and anger. She learned what it meant to feel loved, but sometimes she forgets. Sometimes I have to get pretty firm in reminding her what matters instead of focusing on what she's done for a lifetime. So, for example, spinning thoughts. She'll start a thought in her head and end up on Mars, going over the negative events and thoughts of her life, intellectualizing problems, coming up with one justification after another for her pain. And I told her that the more she focused on the pain, the worse the pain would get. Studies have actually been done now that show that people who vent their anger, something that used to be the cornerstone of many forms of therapy for decades, the more people vent their anger, the angrier they get. The same with pain. The same with, like we were talking about at the top of this video chat, with grieving. The more we grieve, the more we do pain, the more we talk about pain, the more we react to pain, like with anger, it's a fire. It just keeps going. And this woman did that. She would pour gas on her head, hold a match in her hand, and then go over the reasons that she should light the match and go over it and go over it and then eventually just light the match. Or she'd already be on fire and then focus on the pain and not do anything to put the fire out. All wrong. It's not about whether I should light the match or not, which is what people do. They sit around and decide, well, should I focus on the pain? Don't pick up the match. Don't start the whole process. And then she came up with a metaphor that I just adore. She said, I learned a lot from this last particular episode of being in pain and obsessing about it. I learned that when I do get scared, I make the mistake of focusing on the pain with the intention of trying to figure out the source of it. That doesn't work. That's what I've been doing for decades, completely ignorant of the fact that it's like putting gasoline on a brush fire and then wondering why I'm always in pain. Now I can see. Now I know that I should immediately not worry about why I'm upset. I can always figure that out later. After I'm no longer upset, I'll be able to see the why clearly. So first, just immediately grab the fire extinguisher and put the fire out by remembering that I'm loved. in real life, this is still her talking. In real life, that's the priorities of real life firefighters. They don't analyze how the fire got started until after it's out. Perfect. Put out the fire. Well, partly I'm stunned that somebody wrote a metaphor that works, and this one works great. Put out the fire. Trust. Get loved. For the people who have the opportunity to be wise men and women to people who are on fire, help them find love. Put out the pain and the fear, because until the pain and the fear are gone, nobody hears anything anyway. So they don't need prolonged analysis. It just makes things worse. And that is why sometimes, that's one of the main reasons that sometimes I physically hold people. Because I have seen over and over again people whose hair was on fire. What do you do with somebody who's on fire? I learned this when I was a little kid. What was the phrase? Something stop, drop, and roll, I think. Same thing with people who are in pain or who are afraid. You take somebody who's afraid and envelop them in a blanket, like you put a fire out, a blanket of me. And I've seen people go from insanely afraid to utterly calm in 60 seconds. I was with a woman recently, and the tighter I held her, she was a little unusual in this, the tighter I held her, the calmer she got. And she noticed it. She asked me if I'd seen the movie Temple Grandin, which I had, and recommend to you since the whole movie's about love. In the movie, the lead character had autism, and she discovered that as she watched cattle, when they were put in a chute, there's a special kind of chute that if you push the bars together, it squeezes the cow between the bars. That sounds cruel. But what happens is, as they squeeze the cow so that the cow can't thrash, it's not that the bars immobilize the cow, because the cow could still kick and fight. The squeezing of the bars together comforts the cow. I don't know whether that's something that harks back to being in embryo, got me, but it comforts the cow and they quit fighting, and then they're able to give them their injections or do an exam or whatever. And Temple Grandin discovered that she made a device that actually squeezed her in a box, and her crazy, frightened feelings would go away. This lady that I was holding said that as she was being squeezed, it felt like the insane thoughts were being squeezed right out of her head. She focused then on the connection, perhaps because the harder you're being squeezed, it's kind of hard to avoid the feeling of connection. In fact, she went home and she made a sandbag that weighed roughly what she felt like the force was when I was squeezing her. And when she gets nervous, she'll lie down and put the bag on her chest, and it just comforts her. She said, I'm going to Real Love Group tonight, and I'm going to let those darn flawed people love me. I'm really glad that you helped me through that breakthrough this last weekend. I can't get through life anymore without receiving love. It's a miracle that I've even made it this far. She referred to those crazy, flawed people loving her because she had been criticizing group members, analyzing, thinking. It was endless, and it was killing her. Find the love and trust it. The rest is meaningless analysis. Put the fire out. An employee approached the CEO of a company to ask what to do with a fellow employee who's often difficult, who behaves aggressively and critically. The CEO wrote to me and told me what she, in this case, had said to the employee. She said, in the moment that this happens, that this employee is aggressive, you just let it go. It's easier to do when you can look at it from the perspective of knowing that they're dealing with their own pain and their own patterns of life, just like the rest of us. But if it's something that continues more than a couple of times, then talk to me and I will address it. That's my job. You can look at it as a relatively easy and safe way to practice being kind while you're learning not to feel intimidated. This skill will carry you further than just about anything in life. And the employee either wrote or said to the CEO, I can't remember, said, "You are so right. When I'm intimidated by this particular fellow employee, I'm completely out of my element." The CEO responded, "The fact that you are even aware of it and wanting to try it makes you different than 99% of the people I've ever known." We deal with people as though they're afraid. We understand that their hair's on fire. If we can put the fire out, great. If we can't, then we get some help. And knowing that we can get help, knowing that it's not going to kill us, knowing that the pain is about them, not us, gives us the confidence to deal with people who are in pain. We get now to the Sylvie minute. Sylvie, my granddaughter, as always reported to me by her mother, our daughter Jeanette. Jeanette writes, "Sylvie politely made a request of her brother." Now Sylvie's only 4. So for a 4-year-old to make a polite request of a moderately hyperactive, bouncing off the walls 3-year-old boy is amazing. Sylvie politely made a request of her brother. As I'm reading this, I'm going, well, of course, because Sylvie is my perfect granddaughter. And I, Jeanette speaking now, and I commented on, probably praised, in fact, how she handled it. Sylvie, 4 years old, said this to me, her mother: "I only did it because I didn't want you to say to me, 'Sylvie, be kind.'" Whoa. Very few adults have I ever heard have that kind of insight. Sylvie had learned that if she's not kind to her brother, her mother would tell her to be kind. And then if she was kind, her mother would praise her. And she wasn't especially fond of this conditional system. So she was just letting her mother know that she was playing a game to placate her mother so she didn't have to hear Sylvie be kind. Whoa. Jeanette says, "I chuckled and admitted, I need to find a sweeter way of talking to you." Sylvie replied, "Yeah, if you need ideas, you could always talk to Grandma Bear." This kid just absolutely cracks me up, which is probably why I share stories with you about her. Here's somebody who says, "My name is Fred, and my partner, Susie, recently attended a retreat with you. She has chosen to break off the relationship with me in order to better learn and grow in real love. And now I have the same opportunity." That is an amazing attitude. You're seeing this as an opportunity. Wow. Very few people see it that way. Most partners who are broken up with would write me to say how angry they were that I had ruined their relationship. You're seeing it as an opportunity to learn, which is what it is. You say, "Our local Real Love group meets once a week, and Susie and I attended in the past this group together. I would like to continue to attend, but I'm having difficulties dealing with my getting and protecting behaviors in regards to seeing her right now, which has nothing to do with her." Again, that's an amazing insight. "I've talked with my Real Love network of friends and coaches, and I've been given conflicting advice. Just show up at group, and if she's there, she's there, or work out a schedule with her where we could go on staggered meeting times. One of us would go every other week or some such thing. I was also advised to cut through all that and just ask for your advice." So what do you think? You can do this any way you want. I'm not going to tell you the right way to do it. I'm going to tell you a way to think of it. Susie has had an intervention from another coach, not myself. Went great. She came here to Georgia for a retreat. She has made many, many phone calls. She has proven beyond doubt that she's seriously working on herself. Now, I'm not saying that you're not serious. I'm just saying that she's really doing this. And it would be kind not to allow anything to interfere with her dedication here. So I personally would recommend that she attend the Real Love group there, which is what she's been doing and been working hard in other ways, and that you use the Real Love network that you mentioned instead of going to group. So you can phone the people in the group, you can meet personally with the people in the group without actually going to the group. And then at some point, if the two of you become healthy enough and mutually decide, maybe you can go to the same group. You'll see. But she needs to finish her journey. And it's not like she's stopping you from doing yours. So, hang on. You can both still do your own work and not interfere with each other. This person says, my name is Fred. We'll make it again. I've been in the Real Love community here for about 3 months. And during that time, I've met some wonderful, loving people who have expressed to me what a miracle this community has been in their lives. I've read the books and watched a lot of the videos, but there's something I can't work out. I'm embarrassed to be in an abusive relationship, especially being a man who's being abused by a woman. Any self-respecting person would have left this relationship long ago. I've been beaten, choked, slapped, scratched, had my clothes ripped, been called names, belittled, made fun of, threatened with ruin at my job, my church, my home, my support groups, including this one. And I'm still not ready to give up on this relationship. That's pretty sad. You're so lonely that you're desperate for anybody to even tolerate being around you. Studies have proven that beyond doubt that a child would rather be treated badly than ignored. Same with you. We hate having no connection with anyone. So we often put up with almost anything to get it. You're not so unusual. And it's very likely, as you talk about the emotional and physical abuse, that there are parts of the story you're leaving out. In other words, it's very likely that you provoke her to do this. Why would you ever provoke somebody to hit you? Well, because if you provoke somebody and they hit you, well, then you can look all self-righteous, can't you? We were having an argument, and out of nowhere, she punched me. Very rare that happens out of nowhere. And it's also very likely that you fight her back in ways that you're not describing. I don't know what they are. I'm not telling you you're doing that, but it's pretty likely. You continue, I feel so much shame around all this. How can I be so weak and so pathetic? Easy. Pain. You are in so much pain from being neglected all your life that you can't stand to be alone. Even if your companion is not healthy, even if your companion is abusive. I have an old friend from many years ago who said, we'll take stale cookies over none. I thought that was so profound at the time. Still is. We'd all prefer fresh baked, the aroma wafting from the oven cookies. We would, but we'll take stale ones over nothing. And that's what you're doing. You don't know what fresh baked cookies smell like or taste like. Kind of like the lady I was talking about earlier who lived a miserable, lonely life and whose default is now trusting and feeling loved. You don't know what such a default would look like. Your default is kind of actually worse than stale cookies. Garbage. You eat garbage all day. So when you're offered stale cookies, to you, that's a great big step up. So it's very understandable why you'd stay in a relationship like this. Not shameful at all. It makes perfect sense. You say, how can I let someone abuse and belittle me so often and so badly? We talked about that. And still be open to working things out and having a relationship with that person. I'm scared. I'm afraid to let this go. I'm afraid to not let it go. She's also in the Real Love community and really seems to recognize and want to change her attacking behaviors, but can't seem to get a handle on it yet. Yet, I've identified myself as a victim and a runner, and I'm speaking my truth about that in Real Love calls and to a lesser extent in the group meetings. we would both like to, we plan to do a conference call or perhaps an intervention with somebody someday, but right now we just can't make that happen. So notice you said you have identified yourself as a victim and a runner, and yet at the top of your description, you made her appear to be the only perpetrator here. So you said, I feel ashamed that I've been beaten, scratched, yelled at, and so on. So it's unconscious on your part, but you've identified her as the monster. Now you've done it in nice language and you've said that you're a victim, but this is a pattern that's probably been going on for your whole life, is to identify a monster that you can then blame your pain on. And then you don't have any responsibility to do anything. So I'm guessing there's a whole lot of things you're not dealing with. And the short way is to go, it's her fault because she hit me or scratched me or tore my clothes off. So yeah, it would be a good idea if you got some kind of intensive help from a coach, an intervention, something. Obviously, reading a book isn't enough. Going to group isn't enough. You both go to group and you still do this to each other. You're both crazy in pain. Crazy. I'm not exaggerating. Insane. But you each express it differently. She lashes out, you let her, and you enjoy blaming her. So you stay in this twisted, insane relationship just to have somebody. But yuck, you could both do so much better. And I don't mean so much better than the other person. I mean, you could be so much happier. But you would need help. If you simply left each other, you'd find another person to do pretty much the same kind of stuff with. You'd find somebody to fill this role. She'd find somebody that she could use and abuse and be blamed by, and you'd find somebody to blame. You continue. In the meantime, we're doing what is suggested, going to group, making calls. I would appreciate any words of encouragement. Take action. Going to group and doing calls isn't enough. So find some wise person who's willing to do a free intervention. If you can't afford one, do one anyway. Find a coach who's willing to practice doing interventions. Your relationship isn't just dysfunctional, it's destructive. Not just destructive to the relationship. The longer you're in it, the harder it will be for both of you to change. The wounds become more numerous, the wounds become deeper, the wounds become more infected. Eventually, they become virtually impossible to heal. So get help from somebody. Do whatever it takes, like as in soon. You're worth it. We're all worth it. But staying like this is just awful. Here's somebody who wrote, I don't remember who. So yesterday you helped me realize that I've basically been, I remember what this is. This is somebody who's been doing Real Love for a good while, more than a year, and lives in his head. So he solves all of his problems in his head, deals with his wife in his head, tries to raise his children in his head, corrects them in his head. He fakes it, in other words. And he's talked to uncounted wise men and women. Doesn't make any difference. Read all the books, of course. Analyzed his problems. Doesn't make any difference. And so I got really direct with him and described what he's been doing, that he has been faking it. And he doesn't feel. In fact, just for fun, in this last conversation, I asked him at least 6 times in a row how he felt. And every time he answered with something he thought. Well, I'm doing pretty well. That's doing. How do you feel? Well, I think I'm making progress. Or sometimes he'll answer a feeling question with the word feel, but it doesn't mean feel. So I'll say, so how do you feel? Well, I feel like I'm doing pretty well. I haven't been angry at my daughter, which means he hasn't blown up at her and screamed at her in 24 hours. I feel I'm doing pretty well. No, it's the wrong word. I think I'm doing pretty well, is what he's saying. So he's been pretending for a year. So the other day I really went after him about the feelings and that his whole life has been a fake. That's not an easy thing for people to hear. He wrote, "Yesterday you helped me realize that I've basically been lying to myself and everyone around me my whole life." Yes, you have. Not your fault. You're taught to be afraid and to lie, as well as living in your head. It's just what you learn to do to survive. You continue. Way back somewhere as a scared kid, I started seeking approval to gain praise and safety, and I've been doing it ever since. Yep, you really have. So you were listening. I look at it now and I feel like I have layers and layers of beliefs and behaviors that I've developed and honed for this purpose. So, for example, I read books so that I appear to be knowledgeable when we have conversations with friends. I learn how to be sociable, witty, fun, good company. Even with my own kids, I'm realizing that I do fun things not so that they will have fun. I do fun things so they will find me fun and so they will like me. That's a pretty profound realization for a parent to admit. I realize that I've been doing stuff to avoid disapproval, even being kind and nice to people because I want to be seen as a kind and good person. The list goes on and seems to cover just about everything I say or do every day. It has been my life's quest. This is excellent. This is textbook listening in the way of 8, 2, 4, 6, 8, because I didn't tell you all this stuff. I just told you you've been in your head and I gave you a few examples. You just provided 10 more that I didn't give you. So you've got it, at least in your head. So it's good to understand in your head that you've been living in your head. At least that's the beginning of being freed from this fantasy. It's a beginning. It's a good beginning. If you were defending yourself right now, you could not have written what you just did. It's a good start. People ask me this question maybe more than any other. Well, but what does it look like to trust? You've asked me that question a bunch of times. You just did it. So you can refer back to this moment when you trusted. Up to now, you've talked about trusting. You've delivered sermons on the subject of trusting. You've told other people that they should trust. You've told me that you're trusting more, but you haven't really done it. How do I know you just did? Because you just told me a whole bunch of things that you've been doing your entire life that are not especially flattering, and you didn't defend yourself. You didn't make them smaller. You didn't excuse yourself or justify what you did. You just said it. You trusted me with the truth about yourself. So you want an example of trusting? That, what you just did. You continue, but this now scares the hell out of me. Yeah, I would think so. You've been in a pattern of destructive behavior for a lifetime. And that is very difficult to change. In fact, most people simply cannot do it. So, yeah, you have reason to be concerned because most people sort of die in this pattern. But you don't need to be afraid because you're not alone. I'm with you right now, talking to you, helping you through this, have been for a year. You have people who really care about you. But it's not about the number of people who care about you. It's how much you trust them. If you will, you can get out of this pattern, this hole. Now, to those who are watching, that thing that I just mentioned is how this conversation began. He said, I feel like I'm making great progress. Again, it's not a feeling. That's like, I feel that 2 + 2 is 4. No, that's not a feeling. There are no feelings associated with that. It just is. Nobody has little 2 + 2 is 4 parties with hats and smiles. No, it's a thinking. And what he said was, I feel I'm doing better, so I'd like you to give me the names of more wise people to call. And we've been talking about this business of being in his head a lot of times. So I finally said, did I say it too slow? Could I have said it sooner? Maybe, don't know. But on this particular occasion, I said, why give you more wise people? You haven't yet trusted the two I have given you. What did he say immediately? Take a guess. Yes, I have. Well, yeah, I have. I have trusted them. And then attempted to prove to me how he was right. And I said, yeah, like right now. You're doing it right now. You're thinking and defending yourself. I said, so do this. We'll hang up right now. You call the other. I've only given him one other wise person. I said two because I was one of them. One other wise. Call your wise person and say, how am I doing with trusting? He wrote back and he said, apparently I'm doing crap at trusting. When two people tell you that you're doing crap at trusting, you might think about it. So that's what got this discussion started, was him wanting additional wise people. And that's why I just said it's not about the number of people who care about you. It's about how much you trust them. I would infinitely rather have one person who really loves me and I trust them than to have 100 people that I trust a little. Because 100 times 10% equals nothing. You continue. If I'm not who I thought I was, the person that I've been my whole life, then who am I? That's a really good question. And as you trust and lose your fear, you'll discover who you are. You really will. You don't need to worry about that. If you run off on an intellectual journey of self-discovery, you're going to come back with nothing but more fears and more thinking. You don't work at discovering who you are. In fact, it's almost a meaningless question to ask. Another frightening exercise. Just trust, lose the fear, and you'll discover it. You said, it's like being sucked into a big, scary vacuum. I'm afraid I'll be lost. What am I going to do in there? Easy. Hold your hand out and take the hands that are being offered to you. Really. That's it. No vacuum. You're in a pit, yeah, but there's a way out, which eliminates the fear. Just trust. Hold your hand out. Take the hand being extended and follow. I've had the opportunity many times in my life to go places that are pretty scary, or could be. But on each occasion, I was with somebody who'd been there before, somebody who knew what they were doing. And I didn't worry a bit because I knew they'd been there before. I knew that they knew what they were doing. And I just followed them. One guy actually said to me deep in a cave, if you can see my boots or my butt, you're in the right place. I went, I'm good. I can do this. Boots or butt. Got it. Simple. Same here. Well, I got to get rid of the mental picture of you looking at my butt, but I can deal with that. Here's a woman who said, I've been planning this trip to France for years, and I agreed to go with a friend who I knew ahead of time would sometimes be difficult. See, already it's like you've set yourself up for a problem. Now I'm in the middle of the trip, and I'm so angry I could scream, and I feel trapped, which I hate. That's the problem with sharing vacations or putting yourself in real love terms, as I've told people many times. Never put yourself in a situation where you know you're going to get emptied out. That's just stupid on your part. It's not the fault of the person who at least contributes to your getting emptied out. So here you are in a strange place on a vacation and you feel trapped with them. Understandable. But you're not trapped. You're not, I promise. So let's see how your letter continues. You say, my friend made arrangements with the apartments that we were going to stay in, and she agreed to pay cash, but never told me that. Now, she can't get enough cash out of the ATM and needs money from me to pay, and I'm furious because this kind of thing happens with her all the time. I would never have agreed to this, and I feel like I'm having to give her cash that I didn't agree to. I know it's a loan, but I'm not just a little angry. I'm at cussing level furious. Sweetie, make a choice. The fury isn't helping you. Give her the money or don't. But you choose. She doesn't. At the place where I get my chainsaw fixed, there's a sign, which many of us have seen over the workshop, that says, "A lack of preparedness on your part does not constitute an emergency on ours." So if you've been listening to your chainsaw rattle and make more and more noise and make smoke for a month, and then you bring it in and say, "I need it in an hour," that's your emergency, not ours. Same for you, honey. You choose. Do what you want. You could say you don't have enough. That's up to you that you say you don't have enough, because you get to decide what enough is. And then she will have to make the arrangements with the owner of the apartments, not you. Just because she can't get the money out of the ATM doesn't mean that you become the ATM. No, she can work this out. Unlikely that the owner of the apartment's going to put her in the alley, but he might. Or you could give her the loan, whatever. But it's your call. And you make the choice you want to make. You don't just make the one that keeps the peace. You've been doing that all your life. And how's that worked out for you? It's made you feel empty, alone, used, miserable, victimized, and unconnected to everybody. You continue. Every day it's something else. I'll bet. See, you knew before you went that she would be a problem. And yet, here you are. Much like the relationship of the man that was talking earlier in the abused relationship. Has so little sense of connectedness in his life. He's so miserable, he's so empty, that he's willing to be in a relationship even with somebody who hits him. And so are you. And so have you been. You've been in a relationship with other men. You've been in a relationship with a husband. You've been in a relationship with friends who use you, and you let them. And you know they're going to use you, and you stay with them. You say, "I feel like I'm being a jerk for being stingy," but the feelings of being trapped are quite intense. All your life, you've been a hostage, my dear, to what other people would think. It's got to stop, or you'll be miserable everywhere. Oh, wait, you already have been miserable everywhere. So you've already tried that. We don't need to try it anymore to discover what it's like to feel trapped, miserable. You decide what you want to do, and how other people react is their problem. It doesn't mean ever to be intentionally unkind to somebody, but her lack of preparation is not your problem. And see, I don't worry about you being intentionally unkind. You're a natural people pleaser. You don't have to tell a people pleaser not to be intentionally unkind. They're incapable of it. So your problem is pathological kindness. A kindness that is not real, that comes from fear. I've heard people say you can't be too kind. Yeah, you really can. It depends on what the motivation is. You say, "I'm feeling beyond afraid that I'm not loved. My negativity is so intense." And this would be a place where you would say the 5 truths that you and I have gone over on many occasions. I'm definitely believing that I'm not loved and maybe even invisible. Again, the 5 truths. You get to make the choice you want. But until you remember that you do have love, then you're going to be terrified at the loss of any even scrap of imitation love. So the 5 truths are pretty key to you, honey. You do have people who love you. You are not alone. You really do have everything you need and nothing to fear. So you're going to be happy. When you remember that, then incurring the wrath of somebody you're on vacation with is really just not a big deal. So do not ruin your trip with feeling trapped. Either agree to give her a loan or don't. If you don't, let her figure it out. Have fun on your trip, kid. Quit letting her ruin it, because you've been doing that all your life. You let your husband ruin your marriage because you let every little event become happiness ending. So he really didn't make you unhappy. You let each event rob you of your happiness. And you don't have to keep doing that. You're really not trapped. Let's see, I think we do have time for one more. Here's a letter that a woman wrote to her entire extended family. She said, I just want to share some pretty amazing news with you. She said, my ex-husband and I have fought continuously for years, as you know, and the effect on our daughter has been horrifying, not to mention the effect on us two adults. And then we went to Georgia and we learned what it means to be loving. Now, I'm going to pause just briefly. I've said it many times, but I'm going to do it again. It's not about coming to Georgia, and it ain't about me. She's just saying she came to Georgia because this is where she learned about loving. If you're a coach doing interventions in Alaska, then she would have said, and then we went to Alaska. So I continue. She said, we learned what it means to be loving. I can hardly tell you what this has done for us. My ex and I don't fight anymore. No more court battles. We have established rules in our two households, because they live apart, that so far we are really keeping. Now, here are the rules of their households. No fear, which equals love. No anger, which equals peace. No confusion, which equals clarity. No past, which means no bringing up the past, which means living now. The letter continues. Knowing us, I know that you're shaking your heads like this is a fairy tale, but it's real. Who could have known that it was all about love? We never imagined this, but it is, and we're learning every day. I'm writing this because there is this big, fat wound in the heart of our entire family. She's writing this to her mother, father, sister, brothers, cousins. Big fat wound in our family. We tiptoe around it, and we hope that for the special occasions that we gather, that it won't detonate, won't blow up and kill us. But it does. And there's a really strong sense of pain that separates us, when instead we could draw close together and heal. Instead of violence, substance abuse, rage, debt issues, health problems, and the isolation that comes along with all of that, we could find peace together. She closes by saying, just saying, what a miracle this family is. What courage for her to write this to her extended family. She and her husband, ex-husband, and child had been miserable for many years. They had spent, from the birth of their child, as many years in court battling over custody and that kind of endless foolishness as they'd spent out of it. If we would learn from this lesson, we would change the world. If her family follows her example, the family will change. The rest of us all have an equal opportunity to do this with our own families. So she did what I've recommended to all of you many times. She found the love, she trusted it, and now she remembers it. It's a pretty great formula. I'll see you next week.